Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome in. My name is Chris. Welcome to the teaching portion of Mayhem. Pumped you're there. If it's your first time in a long time, we are in a series where we are tracking a theme from the beginning of the Bible through the entire story to the end. Because if you didn't know, the authors of this story have specific themes that they write into the story in specific ways, from the beginning to the end. And by learning how to see these themes, we learn the story better. And if we understand the story better, we're able to hear the voice of God speaking through the story to you and to me. And we have 2 weeks left. We are in week 7 today. So here's a quick recap of some of the things that we have learned in this story. The beginning picture of creation is God creating this amazing place. And he doesn't want it just to be him and a bunch of animals. And he creates these humans and he brings them into this home that he created for them and for the animals and for him. Like, he desired for humans to be at home with him. And he gave them free access to his life. And his life was eternal. And he said, eat freely, enjoy the things that I created. It is for you, it is for everyone. Enjoy it. Except just don't eat that thing over there that's going to kill you, that tree and its fruit. Listen to me, that will kill you. And they were tricked and they decided to eat it. Because of their decision to not listen to God's voice, death and consequences and pain and curses entered into their life, and they were still in this home. And God looked at them and said, you know what? In this new reality that you are now existing in, you can't have access to my eternal life. And he removed them from their true home. And fortunately for humans, God did not abandon them. He came to them again and again and offered them life. But every time he offered humans life in this story, they rejected him and chose death, and made life worse and worse and worse until we get to Jesus. And Jesus is the first human figure in this story who actually listens to God's voice, who gets to live in unity with God. Like the Holy God's Spirit comes to Jesus and lives with Jesus, and he lives this uninterrupted, connected life with God and his Father, because he keeps listening. Like, he's the only one who listens and trusts God every time. And so he lives this uniquely connected life with God. And as he travels around this crazy, chaotic world that he lived in, which is very similar to the world that you and I live in, it's crazy, chaotic, and broken, Jesus experienced home with his Father as he walked around the world that he lived in. I want to take a pause this week and think through a question. How do we live now in this world? Like, if you put your trust in Jesus, the promise is that we get to live this connected life with God, just like Jesus had a connected life with God. Like, he is the way back home to living with God. But just like Jesus lived around him was a chaotic world, you and I live in a chaotic world. So even for those people who put their trust in Jesus and live in a reality where we're united with God again, it's here, but not out here. And so how do we live in a world where we might have a home with God inside of us, but outside of us is utterly chaotic and crazy? How do we know how to live in that reality? And I want to learn from Jesus and also from Daniel today. We're going to jump into a video that talks about Daniel and Jesus, and then we're going to jump into the text so we can learn from them and jump into some conversations. So let's giddy up and go.
In the year 587 BC, the city of Jerusalem was attacked by the Babylonian Empire. And a year later, the city and the temple were plundered and burned.
Thousands of Israelites were taken from their homes and relocated all over ancient Babylon. They became exiles.
And so now they're a minority, surrounded by a new culture with new gods.
Now, some Israelites chose to resist Babylon by revolting or withdrawing. Others gave in, adopting the Babylonian way of life and accepting these new gods as their own.
And you might think those are your only two options, but the prophet Jeremiah told them to do something totally different and surprising. To settle in, build houses, plant gardens, grow families, and most surprisingly, to seek the well-being of Babylon and pray to the Lord on its behalf.
So this is like a third way.
Yeah, it's not compromise or revolt.
What does it look like?
Well, there's a whole book of the Bible that explores that question. It's the story of Daniel.
Daniel was one of the Israelites taken into the Babylonian exile.
And because Daniel had a royal heritage and education, he was recruited along with some friends to work in the high court of Babylon.
Work for the enemy? That would be compromise. Or they could gain the king's trust, take him down from the inside.
That's what you might expect, but instead, they take Jeremiah's advice and choose the third way. They serve the king of Babylon, taking on Babylonian names and even clothing style.
So they seek Babylon's well-being. But in doing so, aren't they just giving up their heritage?
It could seem that way, but actually they aren't. As you read on, the story focuses on moments where they draw the line, and they choose faithfulness to their God and resist the influence of Babylon.
So, for example?
Well, like when they're commanded to bow down to the idol of Babylon and give allegiance to the king as if he's a god.
They won't go that far.
Right. This is where you see their true loyalty. It requires them to critique Babylon's idolatry of power, its arrogance, its injustice, but they do it non-violently by laying down their lives. And so God vindicates Daniel and his friends for their faithfulness.
So they would serve Babylon, seek its well-being, but their loyalty was always to God.
Yeah, this is what Jeremiah was envisioning. The way of the exile is a combination of loyalty and also subversion.
So they're still exiles, but don't Daniel and his friends long to go home?
Yes. In fact, Daniel believed that God was going to send a ruler to bring down Babylon and create a true kingdom of peace.
When did he think this ruler would come?
Well, at first he thought within his lifetime, but then he had a dream where he found out that after Babylon would come another oppressive empire, then another, then another.
And so Babylon did fall, and Israel did get to go back home, but now they're ruled by Babylon's successors.
And so they maintained the mindset of an exile, waiting for their true home to come to them. And they continued the same practice of loyalty and subversion to any new versions of Babylon that came along. And this leads us to the time of Jesus.
The empire of his day was Rome, ruled by Caesar. Now, some Israelites wanted to resist, while others gave in and adopted Roman culture and its gods.
But watch Jesus carry on the subversive loyalty of Daniel. Like when he said, it's fine to pay taxes to Caesar, give him back his coins. But then he said, don't mistake Caesar for God. God's the one who deserves your total life and allegiance.
So the way of Jesus is this same mix of loyalty and subversion.
Yeah, like he taught his followers to love and even bless their enemies. But he also got arrested for speaking out against the corrupt leaders of Jerusalem and Rome. He critiqued their idolatry of power, and it cost him his life. But God vindicated him by raising him from the dead as the true king of the nations.
The king that Daniel had hoped for.
Right. And Jesus promised that one day his kingdom would prevail.
And so until then, his followers are living in a type of exile.
Yeah, this is why the Apostle Peter calls followers of Jesus foreigners and exiles. He told them to respect the authorities of whatever place you happen to live, to honor and love all people, but then he reminds them that this isn't their true home. They're still living in Babylon.
But, well, they're not living in Babylon. Babylon doesn't exist anymore.
Or does it? In the Bible, Babylon has become a symbol that describes any human institution that demands allegiance to its idolatrous redefinitions of good and evil.
Okay, so we all live and work in Babylon. How do I seek the well-being of Babylon while my allegiance is to someone greater?
Yes, Jesus' followers are called to live in that tension between loyalty and subversion. That's the way of the exile.
All right, welcome in. Here we go. We're going to look at two examples to help us understand our question. We're going to first look at Jesus' example and then Daniel's example of how to live loyal to God while you're in a land that is not fully your home and ruled by an evil empire that's chaotic and broken. And so to jump into the Jesus story here, so this Matthew 22 passage, we're jumping into a story. So I'll give you a little back story here. So this is at the end of Jesus's life, and he has just got done talking to religious leaders, some of them called Pharisees, and he has told a bunch of stories where he has put them as the characters who are not actually a part of God's family kingdom, not the ones who are being faithful to God. They're actually the ones rejecting him and rebelling against God, and it is making them angry. And so we pick it up, verse 15. Then the Pharisees went and plotted how to entangle him in his words. Reminder, these boxes up here are links to previous parts of the story. And so I have Genesis 1, Genesis 3. So page 1 and page 3 of the story. So I'm going to link this one back, all the way back to the first part of the story. These are to help us every week just learn over time how the authors are putting together these stories. So in Genesis 3, the serpent came to Adam and Eve, and the direct purpose of the serpent was to trick and deceive Adam and Eve. And these Pharisees are trying to do the exact same thing. They're trying to trick Jesus, entangle him in his words, and they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God truthfully, and you do not care about anyone's opinions, for you are not swayed by appearances. Tell us then, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" Okay, so first, we've already heard that you're trying to entangle him. So this is like fake right here. These are fake words. They're like trying to butter him up, trying to get his guard down, trying to get him into thinking that they're with him. And they ask him a question about Caesar. Now right here, Caesar. Now, if you're not a history buff or up on your history, remember that Caesar is the ruler of Rome, and Rome is the evil empire of the day. They're living in Jerusalem, and they are Jews, but they are not free because Rome rules over them, and Caesar is the ruler of Rome. Do you give Caesar what he wants when he tells you to do something? And Jesus, aware of what they were trying to do, said, "Why do you put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin for the tax." And they brought it to him. They brought him the coin. And Jesus said, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" Now, the ESV has likeness, the NIV has image, and it is not an accident that this is the exact same thing that is here in Genesis 1. These two translations are picking up on what Jesus is trying to link this story and idea to. So Jesus is like, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" They said, "Caesar. Caesar's on the coin. His face is on this coin." Then Jesus said to them, "Therefore, give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God." So one of the things that Jesus is doing is he's not putting God in the same category of Caesar. So one thing that he's saying, okay, Caesar is not God. He has made some things. So he wants a coin that he made. Sure. Give the coin to him. If his picture is on it, that's fine. Pay the man what he wants because it's his coin. But give God the things that are God's. Now, he's already brought up this word right here that links this story to this. Now, what are the things that are God's? Whose likeness and inscription is on humans? And the answer is the God of the universe. And so Jesus, in this short little statement, is saying some pretty deep things. One, humans belong to God. And so when we're looking for somebody to follow, when we're looking for somebody to listen to, Is Caesar the one who we should look to as the ruler of the evil empire? Nah, you can give those little coins back to him. But when humans are looking to who should we put our trust in, who should we give our allegiance to, who should be the one who determines what we do, how we live, where we go, and that answer is the God whose image and likeness we bear, who's on us. And they heard it, and they were like, wow. And they left him away. They were like, oof, we were not prepared for that. And then we get over here to the Daniel story. And if you're not familiar with Daniel, Daniel was another Jewish man who was living in an evil empire. And King Darius is the one who rules that evil empire. And Daniel is a high up official. He's an important guy in the kingdom, and he's seeking the good of that kingdom. But he also prays to God 3 times a day, and his ultimate loyalty is not to King Darius, but to the God of the universe. And some of the officials see this and want to trap Daniel, and they get King Darius to enforce a rule that if anybody prays to anyone except the king, they would be thrown into the lion's den. And so King Darius signed that document, and it was official, and Daniel knew about it, and he went to his home, and he got down, and he put himself in a public place. He did not hide, and he prayed right in the window where he always did, because his loyalty was ultimately to the God of the universe and not to King Darius. And he lived his life, like he was working for the king. Daniel, in his day-to-day life, was seeking the good of the evil empire and King Darius, because that's where he lived and that's where he was put. And he was seeking the good until that good conflicted with his ultimate loyalty to God. So what are some takeaways from both of these stories? Our loyalty is ultimately to the God of the universe, because we know that we belong to him. We are made in his image, and we bear his likeness. And when we find ourselves in whatever land we find ourselves in, even though it's chaotic and crazy, we seek the good of that land. Jesus was seeking the good of the Roman Empire. Daniel was seeking the good of Babylon. But their ultimate allegiance was to the God of the universe. And when there was a conflict between those two things, their ultimate loyalty was to the God of the universe. And they acted boldly for that. And I want you to take these ideas and talk about them in your groups. Have fun. Peace.